Welcome to the Business SOS podcast. This is Rich Sierra, President of the Florida Small Business Legal Center. This is episode 129th of the podcast. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your support for the last 2.5 years as we inch away to episode 200, which is my next goal. Today we have a special guest. I have with me my friend George Zeitler. I'm going to give you a little background on him. He's a nationally recognized marine expert, an expert witness, and president of Zeitler Marine Services. George also served in the United States Coast Guard. Thank you for your service, where he worked as a marine inspector, casualty, and casualty investigator. His background gives him a unique perspective on investigations, compliance, and expert testimony. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rich. My pleasure to be here.
So tell me, how do you get started with being an expert witness in the marine industry?
To be honest, I didn't really start out looking to be an expert. It's something that as my knowledge and experience grew over time, and I've been doing this for roughly 35 years now, that as I provided guidance and consulting opportunities with clients, I had come in contact with some attorneys, and they reached out to me to act as an expert on a case or two.
So tell me how you get started. What is your background?
So my background, I am a Coast Guard Academy graduate. I studied naval architecture, marine engineering. I spent a couple of years at sea as an engineer on a ship. And from there, I came shoreside and spent another 18 years as a marine inspector and casualty investigator for the Coast Guard, dealing with commercial ship safety and commercial ship accidents.
You say commercial ships, talking about cruise lines?
Cruise lines, tankers, cargo ships, dinner cruise boats, water taxis, all of it.
So as some of our listeners have taken a cruise, say, from South Florida, from Fort Lauderdale to Miami, most likely you have inspected that ship at some point.
Most likely, yes. Back in the day, we used to inspect them 4 times a year. And then we've obviously modified things as the world has changed and as the industry improved. But yes, I've been on probably close to 100 different cruise ships for safety inspections at some point in my career.
You know, one of the things that we a few years ago, Sharon and I took a cruise to the Caribbean, and it was a celebrity cruise. One of my favorite tours was the behind the scenes tours.
Yes, it's always interesting to see how the magic happens, so to speak.
Yeah, they have this 24-hour operation. I'm fascinated how everything works. Took us to the engine room, to the captain's room, to the I'm not saying correctly, where all the control centers are. Mm-hmm. So that was just fascinating to me.
Yeah, typically they'll take you up to the bridge and show you where the navigation and all of that occurs, safety oversight, and then down to the engine room to see when things don't go so well, where all the problems lie.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that. So let's go back a little bit. So what is an expert witness?
So an expert witness is someone who has specialized knowledge or skills. It could be from experience, it could be from education, but it's typically in a very specific, narrow field, and they provide an independent and an objective opinion that helps the judge or whoever's trying the case to understand a complex situation. The key here is that just because you think you might be knowledgeable, you're not the final arbiter of whether you're an expert or not. That actually comes down to the judge to make that determination based on your resume, your background, and so forth.
So in your case, what would they call you for as an expert witness?
Because of my Coast Guard background and being involved in so many different aspects of the marine industry, I've been called in on a lot of different cases. Everything from administrative cases where people want to build a dock behind their house that may obstruct the use of a canal or may impact the channel. I've dealt with personal injury cases. People have a fall on a charter fishing boat, or two boats collide, and I get involved in determining where the fault may have lie in those accidents.
Okay. At what point in the litigation process do they bring you in? Usually,
it can vary, and sometimes it depends on the specifics of the case. With an accident, the earlier the expert gets involved, the better, because you avoid the spoliation of evidence, the need to inspect the boats that are involved, or to go visit the accident scene. Obviously, we don't want, the longer we wait, the less accurate the evidence is, the more opportunity for evidence to disappear. And so in those types of cases, it might be brought in very early. Other cases, I may not be brought in until weeks or months before they're ready to go to trial, as they've started to do depositions and look at discovery evidence. They start to realize that the case is more complex. And so they need to have someone come in and provide an expert opinion based on some of the things that have been discovered.
Okay. So as an expert witness, you actually are subject to a deposition. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And they can also challenge whether or not you're an expert or not.
Yes, they can, called a Daubert challenge.
And as part of your job as an expert, do you provide a report?
In most cases, yes, especially as we move forward towards deposition and towards trial. Typically, there will be a written report. There are times where early on, especially if settlement negotiations and mediation are going on, I may not actually provide the report. I'll go through the process of developing my opinions in order to write a report, but the attorney and I will discuss when they want to actually put pen to paper, because again, all of that becomes potentially discoverable. So a lot of times we'll have a conversation about what my opinions are so that they can go into mediation and talk from a position of strength without having to have anything in writing. Mm-hmm. So it can depend.
Do you have a preference or exclusivity about who do you represent, whether it's plaintiff or defense?
I don't have any specificity. I am about 70-30 plaintiff versus defense, but I do represent both sides depending on the case.
Okay. So it could be a plaintiff could retain you, or defense can retain you as well.
Correct. In a typical case, especially one that necessitates an expert, you will have an expert on both sides, and maybe more than one expert on each side. So it just depends on the case. But as far as my business practice, I do not prefer one side or the other.
Yeah. Although we're in Florida, we're in Boca Raton here, recording in the studio. And do you have any geographic restrictions on who can retain you for your services?
I do not. I have been involved in cases in Los Angeles, in Pennsylvania. I've got cases going on in Connecticut and New York at the moment. So no, I don't have that. Part of that just comes down to the my availability, and also, is there a need for my expertise? In some cases, I may not be the most suitable expert. So, so I let the case drive that more than me setting a geographical limit.
Yeah. So somebody retained you, say, recently we saw some, unfortunately, tragedies that somebody fell off a boat in Miami, and then one of the cruise lines. So if somebody retains you, what is the first thing you do?
So the first thing that is going to happen is the attorney is going to ask if I have a conflict of interest. Do I work with any of the other parties? Do I work for any of the other parties that are involved, or do I have a personal relationship with any of the parties? And that's really the first key. Assuming that is not an issue, at that point, either if it's a case like you just described where someone fell off a cruise ship, we would try to, one, set up a inspection of the vessel and look at the scene and where we think they went overboard. But my most pressing job will be to provide information to the attorney on documentation and documentary evidence that we may want to try and collect, CCTV footage. With the cruise ships nowadays, you have all of the room key cards are recorded whenever the key card is used. So now we want to get that information so that we can start tracking movements and try and figure out what happened.
Okay. So once you gather this information, what is the next step?
For me, it's a process of, one, reviewing all the documentation, lengthy note taking, and at that point, once I've gone through all the documentation, I may go back to the attorney and say, "Hey, we're lacking in this area. Can we try and, here's some things that we may want to seek out from the opposition, the opposite attorney and the other parties." But at the same time, I'm starting to formulate a hypothesis on what I think happened, and then trying to see if that hypothesis fits the facts or if there are facts and evidence that disprove what I think. So I'm going through a cycle of testing my theories, and that is critical as an expert witness. You have to use scientific rigor in your processes. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you went through and you considered all possible options, and then explain why your opinion is the only logical explanation for what happened.
When looking at types of cases that you are usually retained for, could you be a little more specific about, you just give an example of the type of cases you usually retained for? So for example, if an attorney is listening to this now and they have an issue that involves, a vessel, maritime vessel, and they might need an expert witness. So what type of cases usually do you get consulted on?
So I've done quite a few personal injury. I've had 2 or 3 cases where people have gotten injured on pontoon boats, where the design of the boat or the maintenance of the boat may have been at fault. And so I've done personal injury there. I've had cases where people have fallen on boats and gotten injured, and we've looked at those. I've had, I'm in the midst of a case right now where a boat was purchased, transported, and when it arrived at its new home and was getting ready to be launched, they found that there was damage. And we're looking at who caused the damage. So it can vary quite a bit.
Okay. Is there a risk for, in a case that the attorney may not bring an expert witness at the beginning of the case?
There is a risk because, and the risk generally comes to not having sufficient evidence to be able to support the conclusion that we want to come to or the opinion we want to arrive at. I've had cases where I was brought in and had 3 weeks without being able to physically look at the vessel, 3 weeks to issue a report.
That's a tight schedule.
Very, very tight schedule, and you're relying on work that you didn't generate. And so you lose out on the ability to go through your own thought process when I'm at the vessel. I'm already, I can put my hands on it. I can feel what the damage looks like. I can measure it myself. If I'm brought in at the last minute, then I don't have that opportunity. I'm relying on the work of others, and it creates a little more question about the veracity of my opinion. There's a little more gray area into it because I haven't developed all the information.
Okay. And how long you have worked as an expert witness in terms of your career?
I have mostly the last 10 years have been. I started my first case was 2016 or 2017, somewhere around there, and it's become a much larger segment of my business in the last 4 to 5 years, to the point where it's probably a third of my business.
Right. And just roughly, how many cases you have testified for in the last 10 years?
I've been involved in about 25 cases over the last 10 years. And of those, I've been deposed on, I believe, 5 or 6, and 3 or 4 of those actually went to trial. More often than not, the cases are settled, and it's the expert that is able to help push the settlement quite often.
That's actually my next question. What impact can you have as an expert witness in settlement negotiations?
You can have a fairly significant impact, especially if you have a very meticulous, well-documented, well-supported report that doesn't allow a lot of room for question. Meaning that when you go to trial, the opposing attorney is not going to be able to cast a lot of reasonable doubt on your processes and your conclusions. But the other thing is that as an expert witness, I consider myself an advisor and an educator. So my goal is to educate my attorney that I'm working with on how the marine industry works and other avenues where we might be able to approach it, or different ways that we may be able to approach the case. For example, I had a personal injury case on a charter fishing boat where unfortunately one of the passengers fell, significant leg injuries. And because it was a commercial vessel, the owner and the captain had a duty to report that injury to the Coast Guard. I actually advised my attorney to start the questioning because in my research, I never found a report. And that was the catalyst to settling the case almost immediately because they hadn't done it. And now they are subject, should we have gone to trial, that could have been turned over to the Coast Guard, fines, suspension of license, things like that could have occurred.
How does your Coast Guard experience help you with your career?
For me, it helps a couple of different ways. As a marine inspector and a casualty investigator, it was years and years of work reading and understanding the U.S. Code, the Code of Federal Regulations, and all of the requirements. So you develop a lot of people call us sea lawyers because we spend almost as much time in law as attorneys do.
Probably more.
And so that helped me quite a bit. But the discipline, the step-by-step process of going through and approaching an incident or an accident or an investigation really is what I pull most out of my Coast Guard career.
Well, thank you again for your service.
Well, thank you.
So do you find that some of the attorneys that retain you, they are in the maritime industry, or they're just regular PI attorneys?
The majority of the attorneys I work with are personal injury or are working in or outside of the maritime industry. If most maritime attorneys are going to work in federal court, and the rest of the attorneys are typically working under state court, local jurisdictions and things like that. And there's a lot more incidents and a lot more accidents, product liability cases and things like that that are brought up in local
State court.
As opposed to federal court.
So I would imagine if you're dealing with an attorney who has no familiarity with the maritime industry, that's more of a learning curve and education process for that attorney.
Correct.
Versus somebody that is familiar with the maritime industry.
Even still, I've worked with many maritime attorneys, and while they understand the maritime law much better, but still they don't have a great understanding on how things work on board a boat or on board a ship. So the expert brings that exactly. I've run a cruise line. I've inspected, I've torn apart engines. I've seen when an engine blows up, what happens. And so bringing that knowledge to the case is really what the expert's all about.
And in your cases, do you inspect you go to inspect the vessel that is subject to litigation?
Correct.
So do they have to preserve the evidence
yes.
in the case?
And that's one of the key aspects for not only the attorney but the injured party is to identify the potential for a lawsuit early after the accident so that can be preserved. I had a case, a very sad case out in Los Angeles where a recreational boat exploded and killed 2 people.
Oh my God.
And we had to preserve all of the evidence so that we could try and determine the source of the fire and the explosion, and step by step what happened. Why did this happen? Do any regulations or any standards need to be changed? And so that scene had to be preserved. They actually brought that boat to a storage facility, and it sat there for well over a year. And it was almost a year after the accident before I was actually brought in and went out to inspect it.
How do they keep the chain of custody on that vessel?
So typically what they would do is they contract a storage facility, and that's usually done through the insurance company for the boat itself. They would contract that storage facility. Quite often they would and actually shrink wrap the boat so that everything stays together with it, and then load it, crane it out of the water and put it on a trailer and then bring it to the facility and just store it. Ideally, we'd love to see it stored inside so that the weather doesn't affect it. Being in Southern California, not as big a concern. Don't get quite the rain we do here in South Florida, but that is always a concern. So it's part of the process. Quite often that may be the part of the process of the surveyor that's involved representing the insurance company as to what they're going to do as far as damage claims.
What does a surveyor do, just for the benefits of our listeners?
So a surveyor can play a few different roles. The most common role that I play is for those of you that have bought a house. When you are going to close on your house, you have 2 inspections. One is to check that the house is built to code, and then you have a second inspection or an appraisal done on the house to determine what the house is worth so that the bank knows how much they're willing to lend. I combine both of those functions when people are buying and selling boats. So I would do that. The next most common would be as boats get older, the insurance companies want them inspected to make sure that they are still worth the risk of insuring. So every few years we get called in to survey a boat so that it'll can get insured. And then after that, it's quite often damage. Somebody hits a log out in the water, or they lose control and hit the dock. What damage occurred? What was the extent of the damage? And then how much is it going to cost to fix it?
I'm going to ask you the flip side. I know you work with PI attorneys. Do you work also, say, with insurance defense counsel that the insurance company retains you?
I have not. That is typically the job of the damage claim surveyor. On a damage claim, quite often the insurance company, the adjuster, will hire a surveyor to go inspect it, determine the cause of the what they call the proximate cause of the accident, and then the nature of the damage, what broke, and then how much of it broke and how much is it going to cost to fix, and then the adjuster makes a determination on how much the insurance company is going to pay out. Should that be challenged, then the damage claim surveyor will be in court on behalf of the boat, which is being covered by the insurance company. That being said, I have been called in a couple of times where owners felt that the insurance payout was not sufficient and wanted to challenge the insurance company and take them to court. And so I've been called in as the expert to look at the damage and determine the actual extent. Or in one case, following a hurricane, I actually went down to determine what the value of the boat was before the hurricane, because the owner felt like the payout was below the actual value of the boat.
But there could be a circumstance in which, say, the insurance company hires a defense counsel that they usually have, and that defense counsel could retain you to represent the carrier.
Correct. In the case I'm working right now, where we had a crack and damage to the boat during transport, the transportation company was sued. Their insurance company retained the attorney to defend under their general liability policy. So the insurance company is defending the transportation company, and the attorney hired by the insurance company then reached out to me.
I learned a great deal today. We have a few more minutes for this segment. There's no. What type of certifications do you have? Give me a little more background on you, for the benefit of the listeners.
So for me, I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the Coast Guard Academy. I also have a Master's of Science in Maritime Operations, issued by Middlesex University in London. I am accredited by the Society of Accredited Marine Surveyors. It's a independent accreditation organization here in the U.S. I'm a member of the International Institute of Marine Surveying in the U.K., and I'm also a member of the American Boat and Yacht Council.
You also retired from the Coast Guard.
And retired from the Coast Guard.
What rank?
Lieutenant Commander.
See, got to put that in there. It's important. I've learned a great deal today. Thank you very much. And do you have a few more minutes to do another segment with us?
I certainly do.
Okay. How do people find you?
You can get a hold of me through my website, www.zeitlermarine, Z as in zebra, E-I, T as in Tom, LERMARINE.com, or you can call me 954-804-8919.
And do you also have an email?
Yes, email is george@zeitlermarine.com.
Thank you for coming in today. Certainly going to have another segment, talk a little bit more about what you do in Zeitler Marine. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Rich. It's been my pleasure.
Let me close the show the way I close it. If anyone wants to reach me, my email is rich@richsierra.com. If you want to, if you have any legal questions or you have a need for legal services, my website is floridasmallbusinesslegalcenter.com. If you want to watch this video, this podcast in a video, we have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@RichardSierra. My phone number is 866-842-5202. Until next time, this is Rich Sierra. Remember that my goal is to help you succeed.